Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Annie. I am a Kent County Public Services librarian, and I am delighted, as always, to welcome you to today's Cozy Garden Chat. This is the final session in a series that we have been running with University of Maryland Extension Kent County. And we are thrilled to have Sabine Harvey with her exuberance and enthusiasm and expertise to help us look back at this past growing season and look forward to next year's growing season. We'll do a little bit of reflection, a little bit of planning. It's kind of the perfect end of the year way to go. So Sabine, take it away.
Okie dokie. Well, welcome to everyone. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Here we go. And yes, I did make a bit of a presentation just because I wanted to share some things with you. So first of all, obviously, one of the things we need to do is look back at the weather because, well, although there are things that we can control, there's also things we can't control, and weather would be one of them. And it obviously has a huge impact on our gardening season. So we should keep that in mind and not beat ourselves over the head too much if things don't go the way they want. Anyway, for the first time in many years, we actually had we had a mild winter, but it wasn't followed by a late cold snap. And in the past, I want to say 3 or 4 years, had mild, sometimes harsh wind, some very low temperatures, but then it was followed by this really late cold snap, which just wreaked havoc with so many plants. Anyway, we didn't have that this year. We kind of have a nice gradual process. So that meant that like our hydrangeas didn't die and our fig trees didn't die. So that was very nice. The not so nice part was that it was very wet, horribly wet. In the mid of the summer, it also got to be pretty darn hot. I can't remember how many days over 90 degrees we had there consecutively, but it was quite a number. And of course, all of that led to fungal diseases. So I think I had the most miserable vegetable gardening season ever. I have never grown less tomatoes in all, oh gosh, 25 plus years that I've been growing tomatoes. So, but here is my big revelation. So this year, I finally managed to let go of things. So one of the I was just telling you about the late cold snaps that we've had, and I have a bunch of fruit trees. So I had apricot trees, plum trees, apple trees, just a whole bunch. And because we kept having these late cold snaps, those trees would never produce because they would flower, they would get pollinated, and then we would have that late cold snap, and all those very early developing fruits would then get damaged and no harvest. On top of that, they had grown completely out of proportion. And like my plum trees, well, they also got black knot and God knows whatever. Long story short, I finally realized a lot of these trees, basically, they were just work. And all I did was picking up rotting fruit, cutting out diseased branches, running around like a crazy banshee in late winter, trying to get all these trees pruned and stuff. And I realized that rather than bring me joy, they were actually just really bringing me a lot of work, few rewards. So now, everybody, don't gasp too much, but what we did is we removed them. Simple as that. I finally said, you know what? I need a little bit more simplicity. And these trees are simply dysfunctional and are not really adding much to anything. And all they're doing is creating a lot of work. So we finally decided, you know what? Time to chop them down. On top of that, you know, they were also seriously diseased. So that was not good. I also had a gigantic heirloom apple tree that was supposed to be a semi-dwarf. Well, let me tell you, it was a giant. And it was one of my beloved apples from the Netherlands. But God, it never, ever in 10 years produced a single apple. And all that it did, because it was an heirloom, was getting very sick. And obviously that disease would spread to the other apple trees. So none of them ever stood a chance. So chop that down, one down too. And actually it's been fantastic because it created a lot less work. And on top of that, because of COVID, we eventually built a fire pit in our backyard, just a, you know, a circle with stones and put wood in it, and you have yourself a fire pit. And then you can have like your neighbors over at a safe distance and still see people. So we have a lot of nice apple wood and stuff to burn in the fire pit. So anyway, so I was, you know, my biggest revelation was kind of like acceptance and sort of, you know, finally letting go of things, because that is one of the things that I cannot do. It has to be perfect, you know, and it's a total freaking mess in my art. So that just led to all these like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with things and it's a mess and I want it to be perfect and it's not. So my biggest revelation of this year was to just simply accept and let go and finally not feel bad about pruning anymore. No, I'm not removing an entire arm, you know, it's going to be okay. Well, wouldn't you know it, that is actually a concept. Let me show you. It is called WabiSabi. Who knew, right? So it is actually an ancient Japanese philosophy. It's not a set of rules. It's a way of thinking, a way of accepting things. And it's rooted in Zen Buddhism. And it has particularly to do with tea ceremonies of accepting tea bowls as they are, cracked and all. And so it celebrates simplicity and just, you know, see beauty in the way that things are, flaws and all. So wabi, in this case, it doesn't, as some words, right, there's some words in Dutch too that just do not have an English equivalent. So the same is true with wabi-sabi. So, but wabi basically refers to simplicity and humility and you know, elegant or rustic, it doesn't matter. It's just, it's simple. And then sabi, that refers to the passage of time and the beauty of age. And so I was floored. Who knew that there was actually a thing for what just had come to my mind? And so on the what is that, the left here, you actually see a wabi-sabi tea bowl. But then I also realized, so this concept doesn't just refer to like nature, gardening, but designers use this a lot in designing homes. But it also, you know, it also refers to all kinds of other things. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this totally describes me. Because on the right-hand side, look at that. That is a bowl that my husband and I got. That was one of our wedding gifts. And obviously, you know, after so many years, things crack. But you know what? In this household, beloved things simply get glued together and they stay. So we have lots of things with chips and cracks and glue lines. And so I couldn't believe this. So the same thing goes for food, right? Our USDA has standards, like a carrot can only be sold if it's perfectly straight and stuff like that. But I realized I do the same thing with our food, right? If you grow your food in your own yard and we eat it all, whether it's blemished or not. And I remember my kids, when they were little, like, ooh, this apple has a worm in it. And I take a knife, I'm like, not any longer. So the one thing I need to work on is maybe, inside of my house and clutter in my house, simplifying that, but definitely in the garden. I think for me, this is the biggest revelation I have had this year. So, but I also gathered some pictures and I just wanted to show you just a little bit of the year in review. So here we go. On the left, the Magnolia stellata, which this year just bloomed beautifully because we didn't have that cold snap, right? Usually they get heavily damaged by frost. They didn't. My blueberries, gosh, they were stunning. What a joy. They get to stay. Yeah. And then because of COVID, we went on many, many walks. And gosh, if you just take the time and look at things, look at all these gorgeous May apples there. Just beautiful. One of my absolutely favorite plants also did a spectacular job this year. Those are a native Virginia bluebells. They will self-sow and they are ephemeral. So they're only up for a little while and then all their foliage disappears. Now you're ready for the view of the disastrous vegetable garden. So this is what part of my vegetable garden looked like in April. And I did have a revelation there. So because obviously things didn't get any better because this is what it looked like in May, right? So, and gosh, what a work to try to yank all that out. And then of course I'm like, oh, it's blooming. I can't remove you now because of the pollinators. So revelation there. Also because my vegetables did so poorly this year and right now, and as temperatures allow, I am covering everything. I mean everything with a layer of newspaper and then a very thick layer of like leaf grow and mulched leaves on top. And then I'm just going to plant straight through that, but I am going to smother everything and try to really also in my vegetable garden, simplify life, as well as add lots of organic matter and good stuff to the garden. But yeah, so if your garden didn't do well, this is what my garden looked like. I mean, eventually things were sort of okay, but anyway, the other joy is that I picked flowers with my son and we made a beautiful bouquet. And because we didn't have that cold snap or a really harsh winter, my pomegranate bloomed for the first time in 5 years or ever, really, since I've had it. So I only got, I have 3 pomegranates. I only got 1 pomegranate, but never you mind. Anywho, because of the weather, we did lose most of one of our trees. It is never mind. Escapes the name right now. It's one of our natives. But like I said, what that did is it created space for our fire pit. There you can see the tree, of the 3 stems, only 1 is still standing. Because of COVID, I don't grow strawberries, way too much work, but I went strawberry picking. I thought I was only going to pick 1 quart. This is what happened because it was just so relaxing and soothing. So there you go. We did have, I want to say, spectacular insects this year and really great blooms. My meadow just flourished. But as you can see on the right, that's the other thing that we had to contend with. So there is a driveway there. That's our neighbor's driveway. So not so good. It was a spectacular year for figs. I've never harvested this many figs in my life. Just fantastic. And the few things that did do well were my Persian cucumber, not Armenian cucumber, but Persian, I think Persian, Armenian, one of the two. And my Asian squash, which is in the middle, and then my Tromboncino squash, because none of those are really pestered by squash vine borers. And I also had quite a nice harvest of butternut squash, same thing there. And that is kind of the highlight of my year. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I would love for other people, if they have anything to share or some wisdom, to give me their insights. So for me, my wisdom is simplify, accept things the way they are, don't beat yourself over the head, and just, find some ways of really dealing with a problem once and for all. I guess that's the main thing, right? For so many years, gosh, things would sell so, and then I would say, oh, you germinated, I can't yank you out now. Well, you know what? That doesn't work, clearly, because every year I have the same problem. So I'm really, now when I take things out, I make sure I put down some newspaper, put down leaf grow on top of that, and some form of mulch, so that my work is actually not going to waste, because that's really what I was doing. I was working like crazy, and then, but I wasn't dealing with the problems. So that is really my word of wisdom, and it's okay. You know, that's the way it is. So it isn't perfect, tough. That having said, no, nobody can come and visit my yard anytime soon, because it's just a mess. But I am hopefully this coming spring, yes, things will look slightly better, not too embarrassing anymore. So anyway, of course, we're always our own harshest judges. So anyway, I would love to hear what other people experienced, or if they need answers to what they experienced, and how they might be able to deal with these problems next year. Or if they have suggestions for other sessions. I do think I'm going to try to set up some sessions. Oh, and maybe Kathy can help me with that, with sort of planning and designing your yard's gardens for next season. We'll do that in January, hopefully. Anyway, anyone who would like to chime in, whether you want to chime in. Oh, look at that. Annie just said there are some excellent books at the library about WabiSabi, because they use it a lot in design, especially interior design, and also as a philosophy of life. So do let me know. Don't use red plant ties to stake, or you'll be fooled often. Did you have ripe tomatoes? That is a great one. Oh, there's another revelation that I had. So research shows, right, that red plastic helps warm up the soil, and it kind of, reflects the sunlight, and it does help your tomatoes grow. But I have finally come to the conclusion that even though I have drip hose, irrigation underneath the red plastic, I just think it messes too much with like the natural rainfall, and also with the microbes underneath that plastic. Plus, it doesn't actually suppress the root, the weed growth, because plastic, your weeds are suppressed, but on the red plastic, they just continue to grow. And I actually found that the tomatoes in the bed where I didn't have red plastic were doing a lot better. So I think the red plastic, also a thing of the past. Simplifying, done. What else might people have experienced, or tips, or questions that they have of how to deal with it?
Anyway, something, Sabine.
Yes, Kathy.
Well, my favorite time of year to garden is right now. I have the best stand of kale, and I love planting it, like the end of August, beginning of September. And the only thing you have to watch out for are the, what are those little white moths that lay their eggs on? Yeah. But
Yes.
right now I have my blanket over it and I feel so superior when I go out there and I get to cut my own greens and don't have to go to the grocery store. And there are no bugs and there are no diseases. So this is my favorite time of year to garden.
Yes, I have to agree. I tried. Um, and I think because I had so much growth, of other plants in my garden, I had so many slugs. So whatever I planted, it never stood a chance. It barely germinated. And then, so I'm sad this year I have very few greens in my garden, but I'm hoping for better luck, next year. And I do agree with you because it's not this mad dash, you just have time to be
Yes.
out there. And those are the imported cabbage moths, butterflies.
Okay. Also, I have a question. Maybe Annie could answer this. I have a brother who wants to start growing vegetables in his yard, but he doesn't know where to start. So I wanted to give him a book for Christmas. Do you have an idea for someone that hasn't ever done it, but wants to, and so it wouldn't be overwhelming?
My wisdom. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Anne.
no, go ahead, because you may have something more specific. I was going to say
No,
off the
my
top of
word
my
of
head.
wisdom. My first word of wisdom would be start small.
Yes.
Yes, for
Okay.
I
sure.
mean, it's very simple. Start very small because then at least you can literally and figuratively harvest your success, and
Okay.
it will become a disaster.
And I'm going to put an email address in the chat box. If you want to send an email there with that, we can certainly give you a couple of recommendations for books, most definitely.
Wow, cherry tomatoes up until a week ago. That is impressive. So, like I said, my tomatoes got so diseased, I think they croaked in August. So, and usually I have tomatoes, well, up until God knows whenever. So I got to can very few things. I find myself when somebody goes down to the basement to get a jar of either sauce. I actually had to get tomatoes from a farm to make sauce. But now when somebody goes down to the basement to get a can of tomatoes or a sauce, I'm like, are you sure you want to use that tonight? Is that a necessary dinner? Because I am not sure I'm going to make it all the way. So think about that again.
I've done the same thing.
So,
Ah,
oh well.
that's funny.
A seasoned gardener once told me that at some point, fruit trees become just trees.
No, free.
Oh, fruit trees.
Fruit trees.
Yes. Yeah, yes, no, absolutely. But the trouble was with my fruit trees that they created so much extra work and then a lot of fallen rotting fruit. And obviously that then attracts so many insects and yellow jackets and more disease. I just couldn't let it be. So that was just a pain in the neck. Although I will say, my Asian pears always produce very, very well. I would be like neurotic. Oh, I got to pick them all, right? And even the blemished ones, we'll save them all, we'll eat them all, and God knows whatever. And this year, I just thought, you know what? Nope. I'm just only picking the nice ones and the rest, and I'll just deal with it as they fall and slowly go into the garbage. It was truly liberating. What can we say? So, okay, blueberries did not do well in my garden this year. Oh, and there is apparently a bookstore in Rock Hall that has many gardening books. So if your blueberries, Deborah, do you know, can you tell us a little bit more of why your blueberries did not do well? That may just be a soil thing then, right? That could very well be that your soil was not acidic enough. Or, and this is of course the other thing, our gardens aren't static, right? And that's because things grow. So what once was in the sun may now be in the shade. And since we took down some trees, what was in the shade, oh yeah, is now in the sun. So, and those plants don't really like that all that much. I do find, we've been in this current house for 12 years, that some things that did really, really well, in year 2 or 3 are just not anymore because, well, the rest has grown so much. And then you're kind of standing there scratching your head, what the heck happened? Well, the rest grew. That's what happens.
How do you send that?
Um,
Or you just type it in and it
Well,
comes in there?
I had that problem. I've been in the house 13 years, and where I had the blueberries before, they weren't doing well. And I moved them not this growing season, but last growing season. I created them a bed. It's out in the sun. They did way, way well last year, the year before last, 19. This year, they bloomed. They bloomed some. They bloomed. They just didn't make a lot of blueberries. And I put all my coffee grounds in there. I try to make sure I use acid, stuff for blueberries, for the fertilizer and all. And they just didn't do well.
Now, were they protected from birds?
Yes, I have. It's got a raised top, and I have it netted.
Okay, because of course, the birds will get at them before they even turn blue. I mean, they
Yes,
just,
they will.
yeah. So,
And
well,
then they poop them on your car. It's a double
of
hit.
course, yes, of course. Right, to leave the evidence. Now, the other thing may be, at what time of year did you move your blueberries?
Well, I moved them in this early spring of 2000 and no, I think I probably moved them in the late fall of 2018, and they did well in 2019, but they've been in place where they are this year. They did not do well this year.
Right, and I'm thinking that they probably had enough oomph and energy, and then they had to play catch up.
Yeah. Well, the plants are growing. The bushes are growing. One died of the 4. And they are supposed to come on at different times. They're supposed to be early ones and middle ones and all season.
Right. So, did you actually test your soil? Because maybe it's acidic enough, but maybe you do not have enough phosphorus and potassium in there for them to set good blooms and fruits. And maybe the soil there is different than from where you moved it from. And there it did have those nutrients, and maybe at the new spot it doesn't. So I would highly recommend test your soil to make sure that there's enough potassium and phosphorus in the soil there, because that could definitely be a role.
That's a good idea. I had tested the whole vegetable garden like 3 or 4 years ago, but where I moved them to, I did not. And a tree had fallen from there. It was all kind of all nice and loomy and built up and had organic matter, and so I thought, oh, nice place to move them.
Right, test it.
Okay,
so
that's my goal this year anyway. I got to do the vegetable garden that did so poorly.
Right, yeah, holly-tone is very nice. You could also just use sulfur to lower the pH. Anything. Did anyone else have like a a revolution or a problem that they want to deal with, or something that they're going to do entirely different next year? Because, making some changes here.
Sabine, I was interested when you did your thing on not growing squashes because of the squash borers and everything else.
Right.
So if you could kind of go over those vegetables that took the place of the squashes we usually.
Right. So, we have 3 different species of squashes. So there's the zucchini, right? That is the Cucurbita pepo, P-E-P-O, and our pumpkins, which is Cucurbita maxima. And both of those species, they are very, very prone to squash vine borers, squash bugs, and downy mildew. So that's different from powdery mildew, right? Powdery mildew, that's that fuzzy layer on the top of the leaves, whereas downy mildew, our basil gets downy mildew too. The symptoms of that are kind of like, if you look at from the top of the leaf, you'll see like these angular yellow spots on the leaves. And then when you turn it over, you'll see this like down blackish fuzz on the bottom. Anyway, lethal. So, and both of those species are very, very susceptible to all of those. Now, there's a third species, Cucurbita moschata. I have to look it up and actually spell this for you. And I'll write it down. And that, so our butternut squash, for instance, is in that species. And all of our Asian squashes that I get from Kitazawa's seeds are in that species. And they have, especially like the Asian squashes, you can actually smell it. They have a very, gosh, kind of like a bitter smell to them. I mean, the plant itself. And our pests just hate those. They don't want to mess with them. They also tend to have really, really, really sturdy stems. So plus they are, here we go. I will type the species name. So oh, they're a lot less, if not susceptible to downy mildew. So, and since, you know, we can't fight our weather, those insects will be there no matter what we do. And the diseases will only get worse because of climate change. I just thought, you know what, why try to fight all this? Because once again, why try to create all that work for you? You know, we have to be out there with sprays, or have to go into the stems and try to get those squash borers out and all that kind of stuff. So I just finally said, the heck with it. I'm not doing this anymore. And so I found these, the Asian squashes, I actually found that they taste a lot like zucchinis, but, which I like personally, they hold on to their texture better. They don't become as mushy as zucchinis. So I really like cooking with those because there's more bite to them. And then if you plant tromboncino squash, you can harvest that. A lot of these squashes you can harvest in 2 stages. If you harvest it as a young squash, it is essentially like a sturdy zucchini, but you can also save it, you know, harvest it later, or just put it on the kitchen counter. I had some of those squashes sitting on my kitchen counter for like 2 months and they were fine. Then they become more like a butternut squash. And so, plus I've planted a whole bunch of butternut squash, and what a joy that is, right? Because you can keep those in your house for a long time. I have a whole, you know, thank heavens my son is, has moved out because there are some butternut squashes stored in his room, as is the garlic. So yeah, so I just found that, gosh, so much easier. Why create all that work for you if there's different species from a different part of the world that you can grow? Yeah, you may have to taste, you know, adjust your taste buds just a little bit, but so much better. Plus, the other thing that I do with the Asian squashes, they do produce like crazy. Now, I will say they grow to be gigantic. So I think next year, I mean, they smother just about everything in my garden. So next year, I think I'm have to grow them outside of my garden. But the nice part there is, you know, I don't think the deer are going to bother them because they have this really bitter smell and taste to them. I mean, I can only imagine what they taste like. So since they produce so much, one of the things that I also do is when I have a lot, I just throw them on, either on the grill or on a grill plate. I sear them, I grill them quickly, and then as slices, I freeze them. done, right? And then the nice part is because they are sturdier, because they have more flesh to them, they hold up really well in the freezer, unlike zucchinis, right, which just totally become mush. So then I can just lift these nice slices of grilled, and they're big, of grilled squash out of the freezer. I chop them up and I can throw them in, if I'm going to make ratatouille, if it's allowed, right? Because we would need a jar of tomatoes for that. So we have to think about that one. But put them in, I make a lot of Indian curries and stuff like that. So they go in that, or nice, I cook a lot of Asian food. So they just go right in there and they're fine. So that's what I do. And of course, it's a joy to grill butternut squash, to roast butternut squash. I slice it up. I put a lot of nice spices on it. And, I slice them. I put spices and oil in a bowl, and then I mix it all. And then that goes flat on a nice baking sheet and roast that in the oven. And it's just a joy. Put a little bit of hot sauce on it, and oh my gosh, heaven.
What's the easiest way to get into a butternut squash? Do you peel it first?
No, I peel nothing.
Okay.
I don't ever peel anything. Why bother? Besides, the peel is usually the best part, and the healthiest part of a vegetable. So they also found, so this is interesting, that actually like a lot of our blemished vegetables actually contain more nutrients, because what these blemished vegetables did, they had to ward off all kinds of insects and all kinds of attacks, right? And therefore they created all these nutrients on their skin. And so they've actually found that, like, for instance, tomatoes, like blemished tomatoes, contain, especially in the skin, contain more nutrients than perfectly grown tomatoes. So with the butternut squash, all I do is I cut it right at that edge, where the swell is, so where you have the neck and the part where the seeds are. I start by cutting that. Then I cut through the part where the seeds are, so I have two halves. I scoop out the seeds. I save those for the chickens. And then I have the neck. I cut the neck lengthwise in half, and then everything gets just nicely sliced. And especially if you roast it, you don't need to peel that. We just eat it peel and all. Very simple.
Okay. Thank you.
It's
simple is good.
we don't peel it, it's like, nope, not doing that.
Okay.
So I guess it might be a texture thing, but it really, the peel of a butternut squash is, especially if it is roasted, it's very nice. So other questions, comments, anything, revelations? Jane, it looks like you might want to say something or type something. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
I missed the first 5 minutes, and I was
Oh.
wondering what trees you were talking about cutting down.
Oh, my fruit trees, because
Oh,
they
the fruit trees.
plum
Okay.
trees, my apricots. And it's funny, because we used to live in the same neighborhood, 300 yards down the road. And, but really our climate, and I had one apple tree there, just one, and it produced like crazy. But I really want to say our climate has changed so much. Our summers have become so much wetter and so much more humid. And if you think about it, where is the natural environment where a lot of these fruit trees came from? Well, they came from mountain ridges, in mid-Europe, like Turkey region and stuff like that. And we are just too hot and humid for them. So at some point you just need to accept what is. There is a reason why our apples come from primarily Washington State and Wisconsin and upstate New York. It's just so much cooler and less humid there. And so at some point, it's like, okay, it is, and just plant something else or make a fire, right?
So did you keep your Asian pear?
Yes, because those do well. And those are really not bothered by, they don't get the borers that the stone fruits get. They don't get black knot that the stone fruits get, or brown rot. And unlike the apple trees that get a lot of fire blight and also a lot of foliar diseases, the Asian pears really, they're not bothered. They're barely bothered by, at least my Asian pears, by fire blight and the foliar diseases. I mean, my Asian pears, at least they still have foliage at the end of the season, whereas the apple trees completely defoliated by disease, right? I do clean up really, really well after the Asian pears, but yeah, they are a joy. Plus, the other part, of course, is you can keep Asian pears forever, and you can also dehydrate them, and then they make a really nice snack. What new something else did I answer your question, Jane?
Yes, thank you.
What new something else am I considering? That is a good question. Primarily, I want to say native plants. And primarily, I'm really reconsidering, 10 years ago, I was planting so many fruit trees and things to try to be independent and self-sufficient, but it's got to work. So I also have like kiwis, but they're the tiny little kiwis. And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that those suckers are also a pain in the neck because, they want to devour your house. Let's face it. They don't just devour plants. They want to devour your house. And the harvest that you get from them is really, really minimal. So once again, do I really want to go through all that trouble? And one thing that I'm really looking forward to, since we have been here for 12 years, when we first moved in, of course, we didn't have any shade, and we now have shade. So I am looking forward to playing with shade plants because that's a lot of fun, right? Because you can play with texture and color. I want to say more so, with the shade more so than you can with full sun plants. There it's really about like the color and the display and the God knows wherever. Whereas in the shade, it's a little bit more subtle and soothing and tranquil. So I am looking forward to doing that. But basically my simplicity and not creating more work for myself. And mulch when I read something, right? Don't read something and then walk away and forget about it for like a month because duh. Yeah. Then there's new weeds. So those are some of the new things. I have no idea yet what the new gardening trends are for next year. I'm sure there are, but to some extent I kind of don't want to pay attention to those because just like fashion, well, I don't do fashion to begin with, but why would I want to follow the gardening trend, right? I'm sure there is some. But natives, inviting more wildlife, that kind of stuff. Good stuff. Anybody else? Any tips or requests for next season, stuff that we could do or that you would like to learn more about? By the way, if you are interested in Asian herbs, vegetables, Kitasawa seed, just Google that and they have very nice stuff. Anything else?
Sabine, I really liked, as we're going through the season, vegetable garden wise, that you had some talks where you talked about the Asian So I wrote all of those names of those plants down because I'm trying that because I didn't do any squash this year because the last 2 years have been ridiculous. And
Yes.
I got like one yellow squash. That was it last year. So what's the point of doing that? So I do like that while we're going through it, you can say, my tomatoes look horrible too, which mine were horrible too. And I
Oh,
said,
good.
I'm not even going to grow tomatoes next year.
Because it's a thing, right? You
I
got
know.
tomatoes,
I probably will, but
really. And I almost came to that conclusion, but I do think, in general, we may not be paying enough attention to our soils, right? Because it's just so easy to forget about it because, it's not screaming at us, it's not barking at us, it's not, unlike visible diseases and things on a plant, it's just so hard, so easy to forget about it. But, the research out there really shows it all obviously stands and falls with soils. And then also because of the pounding crazy rains that we've had and all the degradation of the soil. I do think if we want to, think Dust Bowl too, if we want to be more successful in our yards, I really think we need to think more about along the line of soils and protecting them, giving back to them, making sure that that it becomes sustainable. I think it's just too easy to forget about it. So that's definitely something that I'm going to be paying a lot of attention to.
do you think the heat that we had this summer had anything to do with it? Or do tomatoes grow well in Florida where it's super hot all the time?
No. No. So that's the other thing. I mean, the heat, right? It adds to the petri dish effect. And the other thing that happens is pollen simply dies, especially when it is that humid. And for things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants that are essentially, they're self-pollinated. So they're pollinated by movement, by winds. Bees can help some, but it's basically, the pollen kind of moves. When it gets to be that hot, well, it doesn't. It just falls. It's not there. And on top of that, I guess I don't know why, but maybe for the protection of the plant, even if the pollen does make it to the stigma, often then the pollen tube is aborted. So that pollen never ever travels down to the ovary where it would develop a fruit. The same happens for lima beans. So yeah, like in Florida. Now, a lot of people will therefore also grow tomatoes in high tunnels because that way they're at least protected from the falling rain. See, the thing is, tomatoes love water at their roots, not on their leaves. They don't want to be that hot and humid. But yeah, so for a lot of our vegetables, so that was kind of the double whammy here that just as maybe the first flush of fruit had developed, but then when they really came into their own, when they really had the potential of producing a lot of fruit, it became so hot that all those flowers simply aborted.
Yep.
Oh, then we just had disease and no flowers.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Can I do a program on plants starting? Oh, absolutely. Yep. I will keep everyone abreast and say, okay, got to do this now. In fact, if you want to start things like leeks and onions, because they take forever, order your seeds now and start them early January. I mean, you can also buy them and stuff like that. But if you wanted to grow them from seed and get new seed, because those suckers, they don't germinate after 1 year. I'm writing this down.
L-I-O-Y.
Yeah, you can pot your leeks, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I should do that. I always eat all of the leaves, but all of the leeks and stuff. But you could, of course, also save that bottom part, right, and put it in water, and then it will resprout and it will start to grow. So then you can make more with one purchase, and you could pot them as long as they get enough sunlight, which is, of course, the trouble. Any other questions? If not, I am going to, well, hold on. Do leeks need to be harvested before hard frost? No, they don't. They could actually survive the winter. I would throw some floating row cover over them. There's a lot of people who, especially like a little bit further south, who will actually plant leeks in the fall for spring harvest. And so, yeah, I mean, with anything that is going to overwinter, I like to protect them with floating row cover, because you just never know, you know, and the weather forecast is so often wrong, and they'll say like it's going to be like 28 degrees and then you wake up and it's like 23. Yeah, I would protect them, but they are pretty darn sturdy vegetables. So now the problem with leeks and anything in that family is, of course, that lately we've gotten more onion pests. So when I'm gonna grow them again, I'm just gonna cover them with insect netting or floating row cover to keep all the pests out of there, because they don't need to be pollinated, period. So okay, well, I wish everybody a fantastic next coming holiday season, and gosh, may 2021 just be fantastic. I think I do not want to jinx myself by saying could it possibly be worse, because you never know, right? So yeah, I hope everyone is going to continue to do well, stay healthy, and looking forward to next year.
Before
Sounds
we pop
wonderful.
away, oops, hang on. Sorry, before we pop away, I sent a direct message to Judy, and I think you missed and sent your question straight to me and not to everyone.
Yes, I
I did
did.
not see a question
That's
from
because I
Judy.
missed and sent my question to you instead of to Sabine, so there you go.
I'm sitting
Okay.
here wondering, well, how did I do that?
It's because I
So-
sent you a direct message.
Oh,
Okay, what's the question?
I have some low spots in my yard that puddle very badly. Is there some way I can eradicate that?
You had some what in your yard?
Puddling
Oh,
from the rain.
yes,
Big puddles. It looks like I have lakes in my yard.
yes, I totally get it. And so I would say, first of all, look at where your downspouts go, right? Where does the water from the roof drain?
I have it going in. No, it doesn't actually go in the yard. It goes underneath the ground.
Oh, okay, right. And so, well, I guess that is an area where the soil has become compacted, right?
Uh-huh.
It could be. Now, having said that, of course, we've had so much rain that there are some areas, I'm sure in everybody's yard, where puddles were formed, where in other seasons they would not have been, just because at some point the soil was just simply saturated and water can't go anywhere anymore.
Right.
So, other than trying to loosen the soil, right, and trying to break through whatever it is that is keeping the water from draining, at some point there's only so much you can do. And
Right.
if you get 2 inches of rain in the span of 3 hours, all bets are off for everybody.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes it helps to get, if you aerate your yard, but you have to do that not with an aerator that punches, you know, that pokes
Right.
soil, but that actually takes cores out of the soil, right? That might help. But those
Okay.
machines are hard to operate. So, so that may help. I don't know what kind of area it is. If you could loosen the soil just with a fork, but that might be, you know, the area might be too large. If it's an area where you could plant something, you could always consider making a rain garden. You know, plant some things that absorb the water, you know,
Okay.
the plants. Do keep in mind, of course, things like where is your well, because you wouldn't want to plant like a willow that absorbs water really well and you are close to your well. It's start to grow into your well. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you want to send me a picture of the area and kind of, you know, share your thoughts, I'd be more than happy to.
It's in a very shady area.
Yeah, yeah. So I would almost say, especially if it's not a walking area, oh, I just saw a nice bird. If it's not a walking area, maybe you just want to plant some ferns and stuff. There's some things that can,
Oh, there's a thought.
you know, that might enjoy that type of environment.
Yeah, that's a thought. That's a
You
good
know?
thought. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, Annie, for all your awesome technical support, because we could not do this without you.
It is a pleasure as always.
And well, I hope to see all of you and communicate with all of you in the future.
All
That's-
right. Thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.